And as the co-creator of Fig Toothpaste, Feed Your Good Guys, I'm sure that's what you're using on your brush. But talk about what makes that a great toothpaste. And then for people who can't afford it, can't access it, what other brands are great?
Yeah. So Dr. Berhenna and we met on Instagram as just we admired one another and realized, oh, you speak about the things I speak about. We became friends, colleagues, friends. He's my mentor. And then we would just kind of grumble about how there wasn't a toothpaste we loved. There were a lot of toothpaste we thought were doing a great job and that we liked a lot, but we'd look at the ingredients and say, but this needs to come out or that shouldn't be in there. And they were generally emulsifiers, surfactants, essential oils, things that we knew could be harmful to the delicate mucosa, like your gum tissue, and also the microbiome. So one day we just said, gosh, should we just do our own? And it wasn't that long ago. We just launched not even a year ago. It'll be a year in the middle of December 2024. And so what we're most proud of is that we really, our whole mission with FIG or Feed Your Good Guys was to feed your good guys. We were focused on the oral microbiome first and foremost because we think it's paramount. So we wanted to take away anything that we thought could damage the oral microbiome and add in things to help boost or modulate it to be one of more beneficial bacteria. And so that's why we've added in prebiotics and amino acids that are research-based and targeted on commensal bacteria. And we took away all the things that we knew could be damaging, including essential oils. But we also wanted it to be safe and effective. And so we know a lot of patients need an active ingredient or a remineralizer. And that's what many people use as fluoride, but we're not the biggest fluoride fans, Dr. Berhenna and I. So something even better is hydroxyapatite, specifically nanohydroxyapatite. But we were very particular about this because not all nanohydroxyapatites are the same, just like not all supplements that you take are the same. You know, if you go to your local pharmacy, the quality of the fish oil you get off the shelf might be different than of one that you get at a more higher end store, if you will. So we only wanted to use the best in the world. And so we've sourced the only SCCS, that's the Scientific Committee for Consumer Safety out of the EU's, the only nanohydroxyapatite that they've approved, and that is Nanoxim out of Portugal. And this is a proprietary blend. So it's not just nanohydroxyapatite. They've added other agents into it to make it more bioavailable and to dissolve in solution in saliva and stomach acid into its mineral components in minutes. So that's why it got the safety approval, and it's completely biomimetic and it's third-party tested, et cetera, et cetera. So that is something we're really proud of too. And yes, you're right. So FIG is becoming more available. Like you can get it in Canada now, you can get it in the UK. We now have it available in Australia. But unfortunately, sourcing the most optimal nanohydroxyapatite on the planet, it is expensive, and we hope to get costs down. But for those that can't afford it, other brands I like, they're all around the same price point. But I do think Boca was the OG. They were the first to really bring nanohydroxyapatite into the US market. Nanohydroxyapatite's been around since the 1970s, and it's been the primary active ingredient in Japanese toothpaste and Italian toothpaste and a lot of European toothpaste for a long time. So there's a lot of data on it, but there's more and more data coming out because people are looking for fluoride alternatives now. And especially now with the National Toxicology Report that came out, and there was a federal trial in the United States where the verdict came out. This is about water fluoridation. And then the Cochrane report came out. So we can get more into detail about that in a moment. But people are questioning fluoride, right? And the other thing I mentioned earlier in the show, fluoride is antimicrobial. So to Mark and I, not only are we worried about the neurotoxicity effects, which there's studies now to show this, at least with ingesting it, like water fluoridation, it can affect the thyroid, immune health. It can create mitochondrial dysfunction potentially by impairing enzymatic activity and ATP production. So those are all concerns But for me, topically, it's a concern because it's antimicrobial. So Boca was the OG that brought it to the market. And they did a decent job. They were one that Mark and I really liked, but we had a few things like, oh, I wish they did this differently and that differently. It's why we created our own. They have sold to a bigger conglomerate now. And so I think the formulations changed a little bit. I think Risewell is an excellent brand. I think the founders are wonderful. They have a micro hydroxyapatite version. They also have a nano hydroxyapatite version. I have found both in the data, but also clinically, microhydroxyapatite just isn't moving the needle for my patients like I wish it did. The cool thing with nanohydroxyapatite is this is where you're truly going to get cavity arrest and remineralization. So if you're watching cavities on yourself or your kids, you want to be using nanohydroxyapatite. I have avoided so many fillings and sedations and treatment appointments because of lifestyle changes, yes, but also parents using nanohydroxyapatite toothpaste. Knobs is one I am a fan of. It's a tablet, so people that like tablets, it's nanohydroxyapatite without a lot of additives. But we really are one of the only ones that uses prebiotics and amino acids. So I would just caution people to be really careful with fluoride. That's my personal take. It depends on your risk. If you're a very, very high risk patient, potentially maybe you should use a fluoride toothpaste, although the studies now are showing nanohydroxyapatite outperforming fluoride toothpaste, especially if using naloxone. And Mark and I are very excited to share some double-blinded comparative trials that are coming out soon, going up against fluoride toothpaste of various concentrations. And then we have a varnish too, and very pleased with the results when compared to fluoride varnish. And so those are actually going to be getting published soon and presented at some dental materials research symposiums soon. So I really believe nanohydroxyapatite is sort of the wave of the future. It's what our teeth are made of. Our teeth are made, enamel is comprised mostly of hydroxyapatite. There's no fluoride in our teeth. And so from a biological standpoint, it is biomimetic. But again, we want to be using SCCS approved versions. And right now that is naloxone. Boca and Risewell both use naloxone. And so does Knobs, the ones I mentioned. So that's why I suggest those. Yeah.
All right. So when it comes to the hydroxyapatite piece, quality matters. There's micro and nano. Fig has the nano, which is what you're a big fan of. Is micro in there as well? Because I know some of the brands put both.
We had both in our very first version. We found that when you add micro, it aggregates. So it clumps, and you don't see this physically. You can see it under like scanning electron microscopy. And so it actually can impair optimal remineralization. So we've since removed it. You just don't need it. And the remineralization effects are now more profound, much more beneficial that we have taken it out. So yeah, so we don't have it anymore.
And the concern with any nano product is that getting into certain areas of the body and causing issues. Rest our minds when it comes to nanohydroxyapatite.
So again, the SCCS report. So I hear this a lot and see it on social media. There's ample data to show naloxone, specifically naloxone, the way they're manufacturing that particle dissolves in solution in minutes in stomach acid and saliva completely into its mineral components. So because of that, it cannot cross epithelial linings or the blood-brain barrier. And this is why the SCCS has approved it for consumer use. You will see people saying it's banned. It is not banned. There are just criteria of how the product needs to be being produced. And the thing is, this is what we want as consumers. This is what we ask for of the FDA here in the United States, is like, we want more regulations. So, but then we kind of balk at the SCCS in the EU, which is way more strict and stringent. It's very hard to get a product approved for consumer safety. So if you're using the SCCS approved naloxone, you have nothing to worry about. Unfortunately, there are brands out there that are using suboptimal nanohydroxyapatite. We know it's being sourced from not the best manufacturing locations, some potentially in China. The concern there too is not only how are the particles being made, is it even nanohydroxyapatite? Is it rod shaped or is it needle shaped? Mark and I have personally tested a lot under SCM or a standing electron microscopy, and there's a lot that are needle shaped that you would never know because you don't have access to this information. Not naloxone. These are just other brands not using naloxone. The other thing I worry about are heavy metals. If you're using anything from a manufacturing facility without an oversight committee, who knows what the manufacturing practices are? How is the material stored? What else is in it? And so we have seen some higher heavy metal levels in some other brands. So you just want to be careful. You'll hear people say, well, I want to use natural hydroxyapatite, from animal bone or mined from the earth. I'd be very cautious with that as well, because those tend to be very high in heavy metals also. Unfortunately, we have polluted our earth. So when you're pulling things out of the ground or animal bone, lead and heavy metals are stored in our bone. So those things tend to be very high in heavy metal. So naloxone's third-party tested. It's frequently tested for heavy metals and quality control through the SCCS. So they have very stringent standards there. And there's a lot of data. We can put it in the show notes. There's some studies that have come out. You'll see some studies, some talking heads will throw up to be sensational on social media. A lot of those, interestingly, they're animal studies, but also there's one study in particular, specifically the point of the study was to create kidney failure in an animal to then study the kidney. So they injected the animal with an extremely high bolus of hydroxyapatite intentionally to create kidney failure. That wasn't even the point of the study, was the hydroxyapatite. That's just what they used to be able to study the kidney. But certain influencers are focusing on that. That's just apples and oranges. If you're injecting an extremely high bolus of something into an animal with the intention to create kidney failure, you're going to have an issue, and so you can't even compare it to oral healthcare products.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch a full episode. I'll see you over there.
Something that quite literally keeps me up at night. I'm very worried about it. I think it's a global epidemic. Not many are speaking about it. It's something called enamel hypoplasia, or it's basically undermineralized enamel.